o'clock and time for lunch. Bum-de-dum-de-dum. When the sun beats down.
A flower?
There's always been Ethel. Jacob, wake up, we got to tidy your room now. And then Mr. Lewis, isn't it time that he was out on his own? Over the garden wall, two little lovebirds cuckoo to you. Keep them moving, they sharp. I know.
Peter Brian Gabriel was born on the 13th of February 1950 in Chobham, Surrey. He was raised in a middle-class family in Coxhill, a Victorian manor situated on Deep Pool Farm just outside Chobham.
I stand upon the mountain, million miles from my home, on the faces of fear.
Gabriel's father was an electrical engineer and dairy farm owner from a long-established family of London timber importers and merchants, and his mother was from a musical family. His great-great-great-uncle, Sir Thomas Gabriel, 1st Baronet, was Lord Mayor of London from 1866 to 1877. Gabriel attended Cable House, a private primary school in Working, Surrey, followed by Andrews Preparatory School for Boys in Hossell, Surrey. During this time at the latter, his teachers noticed his singing talent, but he opted for piano lessons from his mother and developed an interest in drumming. At age 10, he purchased a floor tom-tom. At age 12, Gabriel wrote his first song, Sammy the Slug. Around this time, an aunt gave him money for professional singing lessons, but he used it to buy the Beatles' debut studio album, Please Please Me. In September 1963, he started at Charterhouse, a public school in Godalming, where the whole story really began. There, he was a drummer and vocalist for his first band, the trad jazz outfit the My Lords, or Lords. This was followed by a holiday band called The Spoken Word.
And I've nearly found a place to call my own, waking gently, feel her presence near.
Peter Gabriel arrived at school in September 1963 as a 13-year-old, while England was slowly swaying to the rhythm of the first Beatles hits and preparing for a swinging, psychedelic decade. He had to put on a stiff uniform, button up to the neck and grit his teeth. Peter was one of those boys for whom the first period at Charterhouse was a nightmare. Gabriel recalls it this way: just entering Charterhouse was traumatic. I remember the first night. We had no curtains on the windows. It was gloomy and cold. Before that I lived in the country, and at night I had peace and quiet, and there was a large hall divided into small rooms. The lights of passing cars shone through the windows, the cardboard walls did not insulate, and everything could be heard through them. Conversations. Some strange sounds. During the first nights many boys cried, others masturbated, and still others masturbated while crying. They all seemed very unhappy. On the other hand, the older boys would have long nights of conversations, trying to impress each other, telling strange, sometimes crazy stories about cars and girls. It was a bad time. I think I was very sensitive at that time, and everything was a huge problem. It immediately became a drama. I spent many nights trying to fall asleep without success.
Tony Banks remembers the first time he met Peter Gabriel at the start of Michaelmas term in 1963. We arrived at Charterhouse at the same time. The new boys arrived an hour before everyone else. I took to him immediately. He seemed quiet. He didn't seem threatening. I was quite a shy boy myself, and he obviously was as well, so we quickly became friends. There were a lot of shared interests. Music was a big thing, but also a genuine rivalry in everything, really. We would play sports, normally fairly badly, but with great intensity and passion try and beat the other. That was the only thing that mattered, the creative relationship between Banks and Gabriel at Charterhouse, and later became central to the band's early music. Both of them did not like the school for their first year their citation needed, and as arriving at the same time, they stuck together throughout the first year. Rutherford remembers Gabriel as quite quiet at school, quite shy. He's still quite a shy person, but fearless. He pretends he's not sure what he wants, but he knows exactly what he wants, and that's his strength, too. School was slightly more to pairs. It was Peter and Tony. I didn't really know Peter that well at school, and myself and Anthony Phillips. Bar our afternoon writing sessions in the classrooms, we'd smuggle the gear in, smuggle it in, and play. It wasn't till later on that we got closer.
All schoolboys together at Charterhouse Public School. When they started out, the band got a lot of stick for being posh pop stars, but in the swinging 60s, Charterhouse was a bastion of Victorian morality and imperial values. The fag system in the competing schoolhouses kept the youngest kids in their place, but the players in Genesis found escape and rebellion in music. Even within the cloistered walls of Charterhouse, something of the psychedelic 60s filtered in.
There was the one piano in this house, and as soon as class was finished, there would be a scramble to occupy it. You could sometimes reserve it, but often it was just a free-for-all. So I used to crawl through the food hatch sometimes to see if I could beat the others.
Peter and I in particular used to play together. We used to play old soul numbers in the main, Otis Redding stuff, Wilson Pickett, things like Benny King. And I don't know, I always thought Pete had a great voice for that kind of material. I mean, he always wanted to play the piano as well, actually, you know, but I managed to get there first, so I did that.
Am I very wrong to hide behind the glare from an open-minded stare?
And there was a strange character called Peter Gabriel, who was a very placid, very, very ordinary, very quite normal chap who would just suddenly jump on tables and start singing, which is quite out of character. He was a drummer, in fact, to start with. People don't realise this, but in fact, he lent the anon of our first... he used to let us borrow his drums, and he used to come along and look extremely nervous.
My drums were my pride and joy, you know, when I was a teenager. It's very strange because the bass drum from that kit, I've just pulled out again, and it's a small bass drum. Has a really great, very hip sound. We started writing songs, and I would write with Tony and Mike and Ant were in another band, so writing, called The Anon, and we'd get together for different sessions.
Peter Gabriel, although shy, he sought out friends to play music with, and after drumming for a few bands in school, he moved from behind the drums to the front of the stage as the singer. Gabriel and his friends were inspired by American soul music.
The band Garden Wall was founded by 15-year-olds Peter Gabriel, Tony Banks, Johnny Trapman, Chris Stewart and Rivers Job in 1965 at Charterhouse School in Godalming, Surrey.
In December 1965, Garden Wall played their only concert on a stage inside Charterhouse School on a double bill with Anon. Gabriel showered the audience with rose petals that he had spent the afternoon picking. This was to be the first of his famous on-stage antics.
Where fellow students Anthony Phillips, Robert Tyrrell, Rivers Job, Michael Coleman and Richard McPhail were members of another group called Anon. Mike Rutherford was in the climax, with Chris Stewart, drums, Chris Piggott, bass guitar, Duncan James, lead guitar, and Tim Hobart, vocals. The Scarlet and Black group included Toby Ward, drums, Guy Ross Lowe, bass guitar, Michael Slack, piano, Mark Weeks, piano and guitar, Richard Apley, saxophone, Andrew Bruce, trombone, and Paul Gabriel, vocals. The groups initially merged out of expediency as the older members of each graduated. Gabriel, Banks, Rutherford, Phillips, and drummer Chris Stewart soon joined together as the new Anon, and recorded a 6-song demo featuring songs primarily written by Rutherford and Phillips. The Charterhouse connection worked in their favor when an ex-student, recording artist and producer Jonathan King, heard the tape and arranged for the group to continue working in the studio, developing their sound. It was also King who renamed the band Genesis.
To Baden Powell, the most famous Charterhouse old boy was pop picker Jonathan King. His chart success annoyed the teachers, but inspired the boys.
I'd returned to my old school for Old Boys' Day, and this young sprout, who was probably there when I was there, but I'd never remember seeing him in my life, thrust this grubby tape into my... Driving back home, I listened to it, and I thought it was really good. There were some interesting songs, and I loved the guy's voice, the lead vocalist's voice. So I called them up and said, what's the name of the band? And they said, well, we don't have one yet.
His first suggestion was Gabriel's Angels, which I liked, but the rest of the band somehow seemed to miss.
Energized by the support of their hero, a real professional, the Genesis schoolboys signed a publishing deal with King's Company and began enthusiastically songwriting and recording demos.
That was a good, exciting moment, and in fact, then we started to send in demos, which he was less impressed with, and we wanted to get an album made, and so I remember he was totally obsessed with the Bee Gees at the time. So we tried to steer one with a slight Bee Gee tinge to it.
In December of 1967, the group had their first formal recording sessions. Their debut single, The Silent Sun, was released in February of 1968 without attracting much notice from the public. A second single, A Winter's Tale, followed just about the time that Chris Stewart quit. His replacement, John Silver, joined just in time to participate in the group's first LP sessions that summer.
In August 1968, during the school summer holidays, the band returned to Regent Sound Studio to record From Genesis to Revelation. The music was recorded in 3 days, and the album was put together in 10. King was the producer, and brought in Brian Roberts and former Charterhouse pupil Tom Allam as recording engineers. The sessions involved 2 4-track recording machines, and marked Banks' first time playing an organ. The material put down, Greenslade and Lou Warburton then added more string and horn arrangements to one stereo channel while mixing the band's performance on the other. This was done without the band's knowledge, which they thought compromised the strength of the songs. Phillips was particularly angered at the decision, and was the only member to express his feelings towards it, by stomping out of the studio on the last day. In a 2011 interview, he said that in retrospect he understood why King thought the recordings needed the extra instrumentation, and explained that the problem was that due to the limitations of recording technology of the time, adding orchestration meant that everything else on the recording had to be reduced to mono. Gabriel and Banks wrote The Silent Sun as a pastiche of the Bee Gees, one of King's favorite bands. It became Genesis' first single, released in 1968. It was included on their debut studio album, From Genesis to Revelation, which saw Gabriel play the flute.
Tiny summer hides from me. Can't you see that I'm just outside? Very soon I'll ask.
The debut studio album From Genesis to Revelation was released on the 28th of March, 1969 on Decca Records. The album originated from a collection of demos recorded in 1967 while the members of Genesis were pupils of Charterhouse in Godalming, Surrey. It caught the attention of Jonathan King, who named the group, organized deals with his publishing company Jonjo Music and Decca, and studio time at Regent Sound Studios to record a series of singles and a full album. A string section arranged and conducted by Arthur Greenslade was added later on some songs. By the time Genesis had finished recording, John Silver had replaced original drummer Chris Stewart. The boys had to face personal problems for the first time. Everyone was perfectly aware that in order to become a professional band, they had to replace the weakest link, and that was drummer Chris Stewart. Peter, although he was aware that his adoring friend was not at his best and had no potential as a professional drummer, was unable to tell him that. The situation with Chris was very difficult, mainly because we grew up together, he admitted. However, we all felt that with him our chances were decreasing. He was a nice guy, a great friend, but he had trouble feeling the rhythm. After the breakup he was sad, of course, but I think he understood that it couldn't work out. Mike Rutherford had a difficult conversation about the breakup with Chris. Mike recalls, I had to fire Chris. Everyone else chickened out. I think Chris knew at the time that he wasn't a good drummer. But then again, were we really good at judging his skills? I was chosen to break the news to him, I think, because Peter and Tony lived in the same school building as him, so they were very close. Chris was a happy guy, and I don't think he dwelled on it for long. The staff that was involved in the creation of this album was as follows: Peter Gabriel, lead vocals, flute; Tony Banks, Hammond organ, piano, backing vocals; Anthony Phillips, guitars, backing vocals; Mike Rutherford, bass guitar, backing vocals; John Silver, drums, except on Silent Sun. Additional musicians: Chris Stewart, drums on Silent Sun; Arthur Greenslade, strings and horn arrangement, conducting; Lou Warburton, strings and horn arrangement, conducting. Production: Jonathan King, producer; Brian Roberts, recording engineer; Tom Allam, recording engineer; Robert Stace, printing.
We're waiting for you. Come and join us now. We need you with us. Come and join us now.
The album, From Genesis to Revelation, was released in March 1969 and failed to chart. With the Sour Turns to Sweet, was released as a single on the 27th of June, 1969 in an attempt to stimulate new interest. The album was released in the US in 1974 after the group had grown in popularity and peaked at number 170 on the Billboard 200 in October of that year. Prior to its release, Decca discovered that an American act had also called themselves Genesis and asked the band to change its name to avoid confusion. King reached a compromise so the band's name would be omitted from the sleeve, leaving the album's title written in gold text in a Gothic style, in order to evoke mystery when presented in music shops. The American Genesis in question was likely a Los Angeles-based group that released in the beginning on the Mercury label in 1967. Banks later said that they remained Genesis in the UK, and put themselves down as Revelation in the US. giving additional meaning to the album's title. The disc had very poor distribution, and it sank without trace. King later said that Decca was unable to promote the album effectively and get the exposure it needed to succeed, leaving him to carry out much of the work himself, which he lacked enough experience in at the time. The album sold 649 copies. Many record shops filed the album in their religious music sections. Since the title From Genesis to Revelation was the only descriptive text on the album, Banks later deemed the material as merely poor renditions of their songs, rating Silent Sun and In the Wilderness as the strongest cuts. Noel Gallagher is a fan of the album, saying, "I became obsessed with early Genesis, despite being a frequent critic of the group's later work, particularly the Phil Collins-led era." The track, If Love Is the Law, from his album, Who Built the Moon, was written as a pastiche of The Conqueror.
We're waiting for you. Come and join us now. We need you with us. Come and join us now. We want you with us. Come and join us now. We need you with us.
Looking back, I mean, to make a few record now, a single or a few tracks, is not a big deal. In those days, to make an album for a bunch of guys who were at school, sort of 15, 16, 17, and couldn't really play very well, to go in and get a record deal, it was only 3 days to make the album, was actually quite an achievement.
I had this brilliant idea to call it From Genesis to Revelation and not have an artist name on it. This was a terrible mistake because it got bumped in the religious bin of all the record shops and nobody ever heard it.
I think a lot of his influence was good. I mean, there's no doubt that some of the tracks we were doing were unwieldy and too naive, but nevertheless I think that he wanted to turn us into too much of a poppy outfit.
I think From Genesis to Revelation was a kind of bit of a false start for the band. It didn't sell well, and it felt very much like they hadn't quite found their sound.
Genesis to Revelation, which is kind of masterminded by King, is very different from certainly what we consider classic Genesis, i.e. the Peter Gabriel lineup, to sound like. The album has this harmonious pop vibe to it, which is very uncharacteristic of what will follow.
The debut, like a lot of bands, was sort of feeling about a bit and just kind of copying.
It is worth pausing at this point for a moment to consider Jonathan King, who, after the commercial and artistic failure of the album, From Genesis to Revelation, simply got bored with running Genesis affairs. The musicians and their first manager went their separate ways spontaneously, in a polite atmosphere, without mutual complaints. Of course, after the breakup, King remained in the music business. However, his later statements about the band, and his attributing himself perhaps too much to Genesis' success, are a bit irritating. "It was I who discovered them," King claimed in the 1990s. "I had absolute certainty that they would be great. If it weren't for me, Peter would have become an accountant, Phil Collins an actor, and Mike Rutherford a lawyer." Unfortunately, his weakness for young boys did not remain only in the artistic and musical sphere. In 2001, King was sentenced to 7 years in prison for sexual, pedophile, crimes committed between 1983 and 1989. Jonathan King described his entire turbulent life in his autobiography entitled 65 My Life So Far, which was published in 2009.
A flower? You go down to Willow Farm to look for butterflies, butterflies, butterflies. Open your eyes, it's full of surprise. Everyone rises and fix the rocks. The musical box. A flower?